Dear listeners, take a moment to imagine this. On a quiet night, lit only by the pale light of the moon, an old dog stood frozen before a weathered well behind a large wooden house. The wind whispered through the trees, rustling the leaves like the murmurs of ghosts. The dog did not bark. He did not growl. But his body was tense, as if he was guarding something far heavier than anyone could understand. In his eyes burned a sorrow that had endured years of silence. Behind the stillness of that night, a terrible secret was buried. A secret he had guarded with loyalty, and perhaps with guilt. And that night, everything was about to change. But before we continue with the story, please support this channel by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Your support means everything and keeps us excited to share more emotional stories with you. And don't forget to check in down below. Tell us where you're listening from, so we'll know just how far our stories have reached. Now let's continue with the story. In a small, peaceful village called Sempaka, surrounded by green hills and golden rice fields, lived a loyal dog named Rocka. He was no ordinary dog. His fur was dark brown like damp soil, and in his eyes lived an expression far too human, an expression that knew loss and carried the weight of grief. Rocka belonged to Mr. Arman, a well-respected man known across the village for his kindness and quiet wealth. Everyone in Sempaka admired Mr. Arman. His wife, Mrs. Rena, was soft-spoken, always standing beside him during village gatherings. Their house stood proudly near the center of the village, a large wooden home with a wide front porch, fruit trees in the garden, and behind it a deep old well. That was where Rocka spent most of his time, and where he kept his silence. Every afternoon, Rocka would wait near the school gate to pick up Alya, Mr. Arman's only daughter. The two would walk home along a flower-lined path as villagers smiled, calling out greetings. Rocka helped herd goats, barked to alert the family when snakes wandered too close, and at night, he sat on the back porch, always facing the well, never looking away. The villagers thought it was a charming habit. No one knew the truth, that Rocka had been standing watch over something buried deep below. Many years ago, something tragic had happened in that house. Long before Alya was born, Mr. Arman's younger brother, Demas, had suddenly disappeared. The two had once been close, inseparable even, but rumor said there was a terrible argument over land, inheritance, and betrayal. After that day, Demas was never seen again. The police investigated. No body was found. No answers. Nothing. Only Rocka knew the truth. And since that day, he had guarded the well. Time moved on. Alya grew into a bright, gentle young woman. She loved Rocka dearly, feeding him at dusk and sitting beside him under the stars. But as she grew older, she began to notice the tension, the quiet glances between her parents when Rocka refused to leave the well. The way her father's hand trembled slightly every time he passed by the back garden. One stormy night, the village lost power. Thunder rolled through the hills, and the sky wept with wind and rain. Carrying an oil lamp, Alya stepped out into the yard. There she found Rocka, soaked, shivering, yet still sitting in front of the well like a silent statue. She knelt beside him, gently stroking his damp fur. "Why are you always here, Rocka?" she whispered. "What are you guarding?" Rocka looked up at her. He didn't move, but his eyes were wet. Not from the rain, but from something deeper. From the window, Mr. Arman watched them, his face pale, his jaw locked. In his hand, the cup of tea shook quietly in the dark. 'Cause he knew, secrets cannot stay buried forever. The next morning, a stranger came to the village. A man in a faded white shirt and a worn leather bag. His name was Mr. Andri, a government official from the land registry office. He had come to investigate an old case regarding overlapping property claims, and a name had surfaced. Demas Arman. Mr. Arman's younger brother. Mr. Arman's face went stiff. He forced a smile and nodded slowly. Demas left years ago, he said. Moved to the city. We haven't heard from him since. But under the table, his hand was shaking again. Outside, watching through the window, Rocca remained still, his eyes unreadable. That evening, Alya sat in her room, her mind restless. The man had mentioned a name, Demas. Her uncle. She remembered long ago, finding an old family photo tucked between pages in her father's notebook. In it, a young man stood beside her father. They were smiling, arms around each other. Around the young man's neck was a silver chain with a round pendant. She remembered that pendant. She had never seen it again. Sleep wouldn't come. And sometime after midnight, Alya crept out of her room. Quietly, barefoot, she made her way to the back door and stepped out into the night. There he was. Rocca. Still sitting in front of the well. Alya crouched behind the old mango tree and watched. Her heart was pounding. Suddenly Rocca moved. He began scratching the soil beside the well. His claws dug into the earth, slow but determined, like something inside him had waited far too long. Alya watched, frozen. What had he been guarding all these years? Rocca's claws scraped against the damp soil, creating shallow lines in the earth beside the well. The night air grew heavier, as if even the wind was holding its breath. Alya, still hiding behind the mango tree, could feel her knees trembling. She had never seen Rocca act this way. There was something unnatural about it, like he wasn't just digging, but remembering. With each clawed motion, the sound echoed louder in her mind. The scratch of truth trying to crawl out of its grave. She stepped forward slowly, cautiously. Rocca, she called out gently. What is it? What are you doing? Rocca paused. His ears twitched, but he didn't turn. Instead, he lowered his head and began digging again, more desperately this time. His old body shook with effort. Alya couldn't watch anymore. She ran to him, dropped to her knees beside him, and began brushing the soil away with her own hands. The earth was soft from recent rain, and it didn't take long before her fingers touched something cold. Alya gasped. She brushed the rest of the soil away, revealing a small wooden box, bound by rusted metal hinges. It looked old, weathered, forgotten. Her heart thumped against her chest as she lifted it out and wiped the dirt away with her sleeve. She turned to Rocca. He was sitting now, his breathing heavy, his eyes locked on the box. Not blinking, not moving. As if the moment had returned from years ago to haunt him. Inside the house, a soft creak came from the wooden floor. A shadow passed by the kitchen window. Alya quickly opened the lid. Inside the box were old papers, folded and fragile. A dusty photograph, two young men smiling. Her father and Demas. There was also a silver chain with a round pendant. Her breath caught in her throat. It was the same one from the old photo. She reached for the papers, carefully unfolding one. It was a land deed. But the name on it was not her father's. It was Demas Arman. The document had been signed by a village elder and stamped with the seal of the local district. It proved that the land their house stood on was not legally Mr. Arman's. It had belonged to his brother. She froze. Rocca whined softly beside her. Then a voice cut through the stillness. What are you doing out here? Alya spun around. It was her mother. Mrs. Rena stood at the back door, her robe drawn tightly around her, her face pale under the moonlight. Her eyes darted from Alya's hands to Rocca, to the disturbed soil. "Why are you digging?" she asked again, her voice sharper now. "Put that back, Alya." Alya stood slowly, the box still in her arms. "Mom, what is this? Why does this say Uncle Demas owns the land?" Mrs. Rena's lips tightened. She walked forward, reaching for the box. "It's nothing. Just old documents. You shouldn't be out here at night. But this proves that Dad." Mrs. Rena grabbed her arm. Her grip was firmer than Alya expected. "That's enough." Rocca barked. A single, sharp bark that made both of them flinch. Then he stepped between them. Mrs. Rena pulled back. Her eyes were wide now, not with anger but fear. "Go inside," she said, her voice shaking. "Now." Alya wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers. But something in her mother's eyes, the way they flicked toward the well, made her pause. She clutched the box to her chest and walked slowly back into the house. Rocca followed her. That night, Alya didn't sleep. She locked her bedroom door and laid the documents out across her floor. She read every page under the soft glow of her desk lamp. Land deeds. A letter from Demas to someone named Iqbal. It spoke of unfair treatment, betrayal, and a warning to leave before things got worse. Then there was a final page. It was crumpled, stained with what looked like dried mud. And at the top, in Demas's handwriting, "If anything happens to me, do not trust Armin." The next morning the village was quiet. Mist hovered over the rice fields, and the smell of damp earth lingered in the air. Alya kept her distance from her parents. Her mother avoided eye contact, and her father left the house early without breakfast. Rocca sat outside her room, waiting. She wrapped the documents in an old cloth and tucked them into her backpack. She needed answers. And there was only one person left who might tell her the truth. Mr. Darsan, the retired village head, lived alone at the edge of Sempaka. His house was small and cluttered with books, dusty furniture, and forgotten memories. Alya had visited him once as a child. She remembered him as a quiet man who smelled of tobacco and always had a faraway look in his eyes. When she knocked on his door, it took several moments before he opened it. "Alya!" He blinked, surprised. "What brings you here?" She hesitated. "I need to ask you about my uncle, Demas Armin." He went silent. Then slowly he opened the door wider. "Come in." She sat across from him in the narrow living room. Rocca lay down at her feet. Mr. Darsan sighed. "I knew this day would come." "Why did he leave, sir?" Alya asked softly. "Why is there no grave? Why do people act like he never existed?" Mr. Darsan leaned back and looked out the window. "Because we were afraid." Alya frowned. "Demas was kind," he said. "Smart, honest, but he questioned too much. When your grandfather died, the land was supposed to be split evenly. But Armin, he found a loophole. And when Demas resisted, things turned ugly. There were fights, threats. Then what happened?" Mr. Darsan looked directly into her eyes. "One night Demas came to my house. He told me if anything happened to look after the documents. But before I could do anything, he vanished." "Vanished?" she whispered. "I never believed he left willingly." There was a long silence. Then Mr. Darsan spoke again. "That well behind your house. We used to call it the old mouth. Because once it takes something in, it never gives it back." Alya's blood ran cold. "Do you think—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Mr. Darsan didn't answer. But Rocca growled. And that was answer enough. Back at home, the storm clouds began to gather again. In the hallway, Mrs. Rena stared at her husband's study door. Her hands trembled as she held a photo of Demas in her lap. Tears slid down her cheek. She whispered almost to herself, "It wasn't supposed to go that far." And outside in the back garden the well waited, silent, unmoved, like a grave with no name. The wind howled through the trees as dusk fell over the village. Orange light faded into ash gray, casting long shadows across the back garden of the Armin household. The well, ancient and cracked, stood like a forgotten tomb. Rocca sat beside it again, unmoving as if it had all returned to him. Not just the scent of soil, but the scream swallowed by the earth. Inside, Alya stood in front of the mirror, holding the silver pendant she had found. She had cleaned it gently, wiping away years of dust and grime. It wasn't just jewelry. There were initials carved on the back, D.A. She lifted it to her neck, letting the cold metal rest against her skin. Her hands were shaking. The conversation with Mr. Darson played over and over in her head. Her uncle hadn't run away. He had been silenced, erased. She needed to know more. She needed to know the full truth. But her father wasn't someone who could be questioned easily. He was careful, calculating. His kindness was like a mask, and now she saw the cracks underneath. A soft knock came at her door. She jumped. It was her mother. Mrs. Rena stepped inside slowly, her face pale and tired. Her eyes looked older than they had the day before. "Alya," she said gently, "can we talk?" Alya didn't move. She only nodded. Her mother sat on the edge of the bed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mrs. Rena took a breath. "You found the box." Alya lowered her eyes. "I did. I told your father to bury it somewhere far from here. He said no one would ever find it near the well. He never imagined Rocca would stay." Alya's voice was sharp. "Why did he do it?" Mrs. Rena didn't answer right away. "It started with anger," she said finally. "With pride. Demas threatened to expose everything. The fake documents, the bribery, the land theft. Your father said he only wanted to scare him. They argued that night. Loud enough that even I heard from the bedroom. I went to stop it, but..." She paused. Tears filled her eyes. "When I reached the back garden, it was over. Demas wasn't breathing." Alya's hand covered her mouth. Mrs. Rena wiped her cheek. "I begged him to call the police. He refused. Said it would ruin everything. Said he'd take care of it. And he did, by dragging Demas's body to the well. Rocca saw everything. He barked. He tried to stop him. He bit your father's arm." Alya turned cold. "He's been watching the well ever since," her mother whispered. "Waiting. As if he believed someone would come for the truth." Alya felt sick. She stood, unable to sit still. "How could you keep this from me?" "Because I couldn't protect both of you," her mother whispered. "I chose you. And I've lived with the guilt every day since." Alya's breath caught. "What if he does it again?" she asked. "What if someone else finds out?" Mrs. Rena looked at her daughter, then out the window, where her husband's figure could be seen walking home from the fields. "I don't know what your father is capable of anymore," she said. "But you're not safe if you push too hard." The next morning, Mr. Andre returned to the village. He was holding a thin folder and wore a concerned expression. He met with Mr. Armin at the village hall, behind closed doors. Villagers noticed the tension, but no one spoke a word. That afternoon, Alya found Rocca waiting by the gate. Without saying a word, she followed him, this time not to the well, but deeper into the forest behind their home. Rocca moved slowly. He was old but determined. He knew this path. Every root, every curve of the trail. They reached a moss-covered stone, hidden behind thick bamboo. Rocca began to dig again. Alya knelt beside him. After several minutes, they uncovered a second box, wrapped in cloth. She opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Written by Demas. Some were to their father. Some to village officials. Some to a woman named Lestari. Alya took out one and read it aloud. If you receive this, it means he found out what I'm about to do. I'm afraid. He's not the man we thought he was. If anything happens to me, tell Lestari and protect Rocca. He knows. Alya stopped. Rocca looked up at her. Lestari, she whispered. Who is she? That night, she confronted her mother again. Mrs. Rena closed her eyes. Lestari was Demas's fiancé. They were supposed to be married that year. Where is she now? She left the village after he vanished. No one ever saw her again. Alya stood. I'm going to find her. 2 days later, she traveled to a neighboring town using public transport. She had only one lead, a return address on the envelope from the last letter. It was a modest house, tucked behind a row of palm trees. She knocked. A woman in her early 50s answered. Her eyes were sharp but sad. She looked at Alya for a long time before speaking. You look like him, she said. You're Lestari. I was, the woman replied. But that name doesn't belong to me anymore. They sat together in the garden. Alya handed her the letters. Lestari read in silence. When she finished, she held them to her chest and wept. I always knew he wouldn't leave me, she said through tears. They told me he ran away. But I never believed it. Not once. Alya showed her the land deeds, the documents, the pendant. I want to expose the truth, she said. Lestari's hands trembled. That man, your father, he'll destroy you if you do. He already destroyed Demas. I'm not afraid. Lestari looked up. You should be. Back in Sempaka, Mr. Armand sat in his study, staring at a photo on his desk, one from long ago. He and Demas as children, smiling, carefree. Before greed, before rage, before the well became more than just a hole in the ground. He stood up, walked to the window and looked out. Rocca was no longer at the well. His chair sat empty. And in that silence, Mr. Armand began to sweat. 'Cause he knew. The past was moving again. And this time it had teeth. The morning broke with an eerie stillness. Sempaka village, usually alive with rooster calls and sweeping brooms on porches, felt as though it had paused its breath. The clouds hung lower than usual, smothering the sun. A drizzle tapped against the tin roofs, but no one came out. Not yet. As though the wind itself carried whispers, whispers that something was about to surface. Rocca had returned to his spot beside the well. But this time he did not lie down. He sat, his head high, ears pointed and body tense. His posture was different, less like a guardian and more like a soldier awaiting battle. Inside the house, Mr. Armand slammed the door to his study. His hands trembled slightly as he paced. He had seen the folded documents in Alya's room last night. He hadn't dared enter, but he recognized the cloth, the one he had buried with the box more than a decade ago. He had underestimated the old dog. He had underestimated his own daughter. He poured himself tea but didn't drink it. He could hear Rocca's low growl through the back window, the same growl that had haunted his dreams every few months since that night. He remembered it too well, how the dog had lunged at him after the sound of bone hitting stone, how the blood had soaked into the soil, thick and fast. He thought time would bury it all. But time like the well remembered. Meanwhile, Alya was walking through the narrow path behind the village, letters and documents secured in her bag. She had just returned from Lestari's house. The older woman had entrusted her with a few more letters, ones never sent, but written in love and in fear. One in particular stood out. To the one who dares uncover what I could not. It ended without a name. Now Alya walked toward the small printing house near the town square. Mr. Darsan had arranged for copies to be made. Documents, letters, even the deed with Demas's name. Alya didn't want to hide anymore. If anything happened to her, at least the truth would already be set in motion. She passed the rice fields, silent except for the whisper of wind through the stalks. Villagers watched her pass. Some greeted her softly, some turned away. Her presence had changed since her return from the neighboring town. They felt something stirring. And in the village, change was always followed by unrest. When she arrived at the printing house, the owner, a quiet man named Karta, handed her a bundle of envelopes. "I made 10 copies," he said. "One to the sub-district office, one to the village council, the rest. You can choose." Alya nodded, her fingers gripping the pages. "Thank you." As she stepped outside, she saw a familiar figure at the far end of the road. Her father. He was watching her. She didn't stop. She walked past him, shoulders back, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. Their eyes locked for a brief moment. But this time she didn't flinch. This time it was he who turned away. Later that afternoon, Rocca didn't leave the well, even when it rained, even when thunder rolled over the hills, even when the chickens ran for cover and the trees bent low to the wind. He stayed. And that night Alya understood why. She was asleep when the knock came. Not at the door. Her window. Single tap. Then silence. Then again. She sat up, heart pounding. The curtains moved slightly in the breeze. Slowly, she walked to the window and pulled it aside. Rocca stood there. But he wasn't looking at her. He was looking toward the garden, toward the well. She grabbed her flashlight and followed him outside. It was past midnight. The village slept. Only the crickets and frogs spoke. Rocca walked without turning, without waiting, as if he knew she would come. He led her not just to the well this time, but around it, toward a spot behind the broken banana tree. A place she hadn't noticed before. Rocca began to dig again. Alya, without hesitation, fell to her knees and dug with him. It didn't take long. The soil was looser here, recently disturbed. Then she felt it, wood. Another box. Well, something softer, wrapped in a thick plastic tarp. She gasped. Her breath came faster now. Her hands pulled at the edge of the covering. The smell hit her, and she froze. It wasn't just a tarp. It was a body. Human body. She staggered back, clutching her chest. "No," she whispered. But her hands already knew. The size, the shape, the bones beneath. It was Demas. Even without seeing the face, she knew. The pendant was still hanging around the neck. The same one she wore now. The one in her hand was a duplicate. Suddenly she understood. The box had been planted. To distract her. To mislead her. The truth was never in the box. The truth was in the ground. Behind the well. And now she had found it. She ran back to the house, soaked in sweat, trembling. Her fingers moved quickly as she dialed Mr. Darsan. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I found him. Found Demas. He's behind the well." There was silence on the other end. Then a breath. "I'll be there," Mr. Darsan said. "Don't tell anyone else." Not yet. Before dawn, Mr. Darsan came with 2 men he trusted. villagers old enough to remember Demas, and brave enough not to stay quiet anymore. Together, they carefully unearthed the remains and took photos. They documented everything. No police yet. Not until they had evidence ready. Alya stood to the side, holding Rocca's head gently in her lap. The dog no longer growled. He was silent now, as if his duty was done. But his eyes never left the body. At sunrise, Mr. Arman came to the garden. He stood at the back door watching. He didn't ask what they were doing. He didn't shout or threaten. He simply stood, eyes fixed on the tarp now folded to the side. Then he turned and walked inside. His silence, finally, was louder than any denial. That evening, Alya sat beside the old well. Rocca was asleep at her feet. Her mother brought her tea but said nothing. She simply placed it on the ground and walked away. From inside the house, the sound of breaking glass echoed. Mr. Arman was beginning to unravel. Each crack in the wall, every creak in the floor, now carried a name. Demas. And now the village would hear it too. The sun never really rose the next day. It climbed the horizon, yes, but its light was weak, filtered through a dense gray sky, casting the village of Cempaka into a dull and sullen half-light. Birds did not sing that morning. No children played in the dirt roads. Even the animals seemed to sense what had begun. Inside the village hall, the air was suffocating. 12 men sat around a long wooden table. Their expressions were mixed. Doubt, fear, anger, and in a few, guilt. Mr. Darsan stood at one end. Papers spread before him. On the wall behind him, maps of land ownership, documents marked in red ink, and photocopies of the late Demas's letters covered the boards. The room smelled of old wood and sweat. Rain beat softly against the shuttered windows. In the corner sat Alya. Her hands clutched the silver pendant. Her eyes were focused, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. The evidence now spoke louder than her voice ever could. Mr. Darsan began. We now have proof, not just of the illegal transfer of land from the late Demas Ardiancia to the name of Mr. Arman, but of the deliberate silencing of that truth. And we have the remains. Buried behind the well. Murmurs erupted. One of the councilmen stood. We cannot accuse a respected man based on old bones and letters. Mr. Darsan's voice cut through. This isn't a legend, Pak Darto. The medical examiner from the district hospital has confirmed the age of the remains matches the time of Demas's disappearance. There is a healed fracture on the right arm, the same injury Demas suffered as a child. And the pendant Alya holds matches the one recorded in photos from that time. You want more than that. Ask yourselves, why has Rocca, the dog Demas raised, stayed beside that well for 14 years? Silence. Alya finally stood. Her voice was quiet but clear. My father has lied to us. All of you. He used your trust to cover his crimes. He made you believe Demas ran away. He made me believe my uncle abandoned us. But he didn't. He was murdered. And buried like an animal. One of the older men, Mr. Surya, stood slowly. His face was lined with regret. I was there when they said Demas vanished. Arman told us not to worry. He said Demas had moved to Kalimantan. I believed him. I even helped him sign off the land transfer to his name. All legal. Or so I thought. Another man lowered his head. I saw the wound on his arm. He said he fell from the roof. Now I wonder if Rocca did that. Alya nodded. Rocca never stopped remembering. By late afternoon word had spread. The village buzzed with whispers. Some called it betrayal. Others justice. Children listened with wide eyes as their parents argued in hushed voices. Shopkeepers paused in mid-transaction. The name Demas was once again spoken, like a ghost finally given a voice. At home, Mr. Armand sat in his study. The room was dark, curtains drawn, a half-empty bottle of rice wine on the desk. He hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken. Rena stood outside the door. She didn't knock. She just listened. Inside, her husband mumbled to himself. Pieces of a broken timeline only he understood. He suddenly shouted, "She has nothing." Then silence. He began to weep. Not like a man, but like a child who had lost something precious and never understood why. That night, Alya couldn't sleep. She stood in the backyard with a flashlight, staring at the well. The police would arrive by morning. The forensic team had been notified. They would exhume the remains properly, collect the soil samples, document the crime scene. But she felt hollow. Truth, it turned out, did not come with peace. She felt no victory, only a deep ache. She turned to Rocca, who sat beside her as always. His breathing was shallow. "Aren't you tired?" she whispered. He rested his head against her foot. "Thank you," she said softly. And as if he understood, Rocca slowly closed his eyes. At sunrise, sirens broke the morning silence. The black vehicle of the district police rolled into Sempaka. Officers stepped out, armed not with guns but cameras, evidence kits and gloves. The villagers gathered, standing along the dirt road in silence. They didn't cheer. They didn't protest. They simply watched. The officers walked to the Armand house. Knock once. Then again. No answer. They looked at each other. Alya, standing behind them, felt her chest tighten. They forced the door open. Inside they found Rena, standing in the hallway, pale and trembling. "He's gone," she said quietly. "I woke up and he was gone. His shoes were missing. His wallet too. But not the letters. He had left those on the table. As if to say, I'm done. Or, this is all that's left of me." Search parties formed quickly. Some said he went to the hills. Others feared the river. A few thought he had gone to Kalimantan, to live out his days in the very lie he created. No one knew. But by nightfall it was clear. Armand had vanished, just like Demas once had. Only this time he left behind all the evidence. And no one came looking for him. Rocca did not move from the well that day. Even as the sun dipped again behind the mountains, and the police packed their tools, and the villagers returned to their homes, the dog remained. Alya sat beside him again, her fingers resting against his fur. He was breathing slower now. With every hour a little softer, a little weaker. The vet had warned her weeks ago. His body was fading. His heart was failing. But he had waited. Waited until the last secret was unearthed. Waited until his master's story was told. And that night, just as the moon rose full and bright in the sky, Rocca gave a soft whimper, then fell still. Alya buried her face in his fur. Tears ran freely, not just for the dog, but for the uncle she never got to know, for the mother who suffered in silence, for the village that had chosen ignorance, and for the father whose face she might never see again. She buried Rocca the next morning, beside the well. No stone, no name, just a wooden marker and a flower. And a single word written in soft ink. Loyalty. That evening the wind returned. It rushed through the trees, over the rooftops, through the open fields of Sempaka. But this time it carried no secrets, only silence, and the soft memory of a dog's bark, echoing across the years. The days that followed Rocca's death passed slowly, like smoke rising from extinguished embers. The village of Sempaka resumed its rhythm, But the silence between conversations lingered longer, and eyes that once avoided Alya now watched her with complicated stares, some with guilt, some with admiration, and others with fear. Rocca's grave behind the old well had become a quiet sanctuary. Children would sometimes wander there after school, tiptoeing near the simple wooden marker before being called back by their mothers. A few villagers left small offerings, flowers, food scraps, even a collar from a beloved dog long gone. Something had shifted in the soil, in the air. Secrets had lost their power. But pain still hung in the trees like morning mist. Alya remained in her father's house, though every room was steeped in memory and unease. The air inside felt haunted, not by spirits, but by unanswered questions and stains that could never be scrubbed clean. Her mother, Rina, barely spoke. She moved through the house like a ghost, cooking, sweeping, folding laundry, but with a face frozen in some distant time. One evening, as thunderclouds gathered, Rina came into Alya's room carrying a small metal box. "I found this in his closet," she whispered, eyes downcast. Alya opened it. Inside were keys, several old letters, a photograph, cracked and faded, of her father and Demas as children, their arms slung around each other's shoulders, smiling. And beneath all that, a single folded page. Her mother turned away as Alya opened it. It was a confession, not the kind given in court, but the kind scribbled in desperation, in shame, in defeat. Alya read the words as rain began to fall outside. "I never meant to kill him. We fought. I was drunk. He called me a thief. He said he'd go to the authorities. Said he'd ruin me. Panic. I shoved him. He hit his head. The blood wouldn't stop. I didn't think. I buried him. And I've been buried ever since. I knew Rocca would remember. And I knew someday she'd find out. I'm sorry. But sorry is dust." Her hand shook. She set the letter down. 4 hours she didn't speak. By morning she had packed a bag. The documents, the photos, the confession, all neatly ordered. She took the bus to the district office. She handed the entire file to the public notary's assistant and asked that it be sealed, certified, and stored. "If anything happens to me," she said calmly, "send it to the police and to every local journalist in East Java." The assistant hesitated. "Are you in danger?" Alya gave a weary smile. "Not anymore. But someone might think I am." She left without further explanation. Back in Sempaka, whispers of Mr. Arman's disappearance spread beyond the village borders. Journalists began to trickle in. Not in vans, not with cameras, not yet. But they came as visitors, as curious distant cousins, as writers doing research. They walked the path, talked to the elders, and they listened. Rina avoided them, but Alya did not. She told them the truth, quietly, precisely, without tears. The land dispute, the betrayal, the well, the grave, the dog. Each word added weight to the ghost that haunted the village. Sempaka had been built on rice, yes, but it had grown fat on silence. And silence had finally been broken. One morning, while clearing weeds from the edge of the garden, Alya struck something in the soil. Not bone, not stone. A tin can, rusted and crushed at one side. She pried it open. Inside were coins, rupiah notes from decades ago, and a piece of paper, so faded the ink had nearly vanished. She held it to the sun and squinted. It was a letter. Not from her father. Not from Demas. From her grandfather. The ink was barely legible, but the meaning was clear. "To my sons. This land is not for power. It is for family. No matter what happens, take care of each other. Greed is the same as fire. Warm in your hands, but deadly in your belly. Don't let it burn you. Her knees weakened. She sat down in the dirt, the letter pressed to her chest. It wasn't a will. It was a warning. And neither of the brothers had listened. The next day, she went to the village council. She stood before the same table where Mr. Darson had once spoken. But this time it was she who led. I have no desire to take ownership of the disputed land, she said. But I ask that it be returned to the community, as a place of memory, of honesty, of learning. Mr. Surya leaned forward. A memorial? No, Alya replied. A garden, with a single plaque, that says, Truth blooms here. Let children play. Let mothers sit. Let no one forget. There was silence. Then, slowly, one by one, the councilman nodded. Construction began weeks later. Villagers donated what they could, stone, tools, plants. Teenagers dug and hauled dirt. Mothers prepared meals. Even Rena came, bringing tea and rice for the workers. By the time the rainy season passed, the garden was ready. A wide circle of soft grass. Benches carved by hand. A central tree planted in rich soil, the same spot where Demas had once been buried, now transformed. At the tree's base, a plaque of black stone read, For Demas. For Raka. For those who remember. Alya stood before it in silence. The children ran around her, laughing. Birds returned to the branches. And the wind passed gently through the leaves. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in years she let herself breathe. But not all wounds had closed. Late one night, Rena entered her daughter's room. She carried a notebook. One Alya had never seen before. I wrote this after you left for university, Rena said. I didn't know how to protect you, so I wrote. That's all I could do. Alya opened the first page. Her mother's handwriting filled every line. Descriptions of nights with no sleep. Of dinners eaten in silence. Of bruises not spoken of. Of Raka barking through the night. Of Demas's laughter. Of Armin's rage. Of fear. And on the last page, a single sentence. I thought love could fix him. But sometimes love must step back and let justice speak. Alya didn't speak. She simply took her mother's hand and held it tightly. By the end of the month, a letter arrived. From the district attorney. Formal charges were being prepared. A national search was underway. Armin had been spotted once, near the port. But he had vanished again. Some believed he had fled the country. Others said he was hiding in the mountains, living in caves, eaten away by guilt and madness. No longer mattered. The truth was no longer buried. It had taken root. One evening, as the sky turned a deep violet, Alya walked to the garden. She sat beneath the tree watching the clouds pass. And for a moment she thought she heard it. Low bark. Gentle. Familiar. She smiled. Closed her eyes. And whispered, We did it, Raka. The rainy season came early that year. By the second week of November, heavy gray clouds had made a permanent home above the village of Sempaka. Fields that once shimmered golden with ripe paddy turned to pools of mud. The garden, planted where Demas had once been buried, struggled to breathe under the weight of constant water. Yet somehow the central tree remained strong. Its branches grew dense with leaves, and every day, Alya swept the fallen petals and soggy soil from beneath its trunk. She had taken a part-time job at the local library and spent most mornings arranging books, translating old documents, and sipping bitter kopi tubruk by the window. Villagers now greeted her with gentle smiles. Some brought stories of Demas, things they had never dared share before. It was as if the unraveling of secrets had given them permission to remember, to say his name without fear or shame. Still, there were days the past pressed heavy against her chest. There were still dreams of footsteps in the dark, of her father's voice shouting behind closed doors, of Rocca whimpering, tail low, eyes wide with warning. The nightmares came most often when it rained at night. And in Cempaka, it never stopped raining. A month passed without news of Mr. Arman. Until one cold evening in December, a knock echoed on Alya's door. She opened it to find a tall man in a rain-drenched coat, a scarf wrapped high up to his cheeks, his face almost hidden. Water dripped from his shoulders to the floor. He looked at her for a moment before speaking. "You don't remember me, do you?" She narrowed her eyes. His voice, low, slightly hoarse, with a Javanese accent dulled by years away. "No," she said. "Should I? I'm Farhan, Demas's friend. We worked together before he disappeared." Her heart leapt, and for a moment the room swayed. She stepped aside, wordless, and he entered. They sat at the kitchen table, steam rising from 2 cups of tea. Rain tapped against the windows in steady rhythm. Farhan leaned forward, removing the scarf slowly. His face was marked by time, wrinkles around the eyes, the edges of his mouth hardened by years of silence. Yet there was something in the gaze that brought back a distant memory. Alya remembered a man who used to visit when she was very small, tall, laughing easily, bringing sweets in his pocket. Then one day he stopped coming. Farhan spoke first. "I knew something was wrong. Back then. Demas told me he was worried about the land. He said Arman had started changing, drinking, becoming paranoid. Demas was going to expose him. He asked me to keep copies of a few letters. And I did. Kept them for years. I never showed anyone. I thought, maybe it wasn't my place." Alya stared into her cup. "Why now?" He sighed. "I read the news online. About the bones. About the garden. I came back from Surabaya 2 days ago. I went to his grave. I saw the marker. And I couldn't stay quiet anymore." He reached into his coat pocket and placed 3 folded papers on the table. Demas's original letters. The ones he wrote just before he died. He feared for his life. He named Arman. He predicted everything. I think deep down he knew he wouldn't make it out. Alya took the papers, hands trembling slightly. There it was. Demas's handwriting. Elegant, careful, written in blue ink. "If anything happens to me, tell my niece that her father loved her once. But greed changed him. And I forgive him. But she must not let it happen again." Her throat tightened. She swallowed hard. "I'll give these to the district attorney," she said. "They'll help the case." Farhan nodded. He stayed until the rain stopped. And then, like a ghost finally unburdened, he vanished into the fog. But that night something else happened. Sometime after midnight, a figure slipped into the village. No one saw him arrive. No one heard his steps. But in the morning, the temple bell had been rung. Once. Then silence. It was tradition. A single chime to announce death, or the return of someone thought lost. Villagers gathered slowly around the bell tower. Mr. Darsan was already there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. In his hand was a torn piece of cloth, bloodstained. He raised his voice just enough. "Someone entered the temple last night. An offering was made. A ring, wallet, and this." He held up a piece of Mr. Arman's old jacket. There was a gasp from the crowd. Alya stood at the edge of the group, her hands gripping her sleeves. "It's him," a woman whispered. "He's come back." But no one had seen him. Not the guards. Not the villagers. Not even the night watchman. Only one person had heard anything strange. Child. Years old. He stepped forward shyly. "I saw a man," he said. He was limping. He had a beard. He stood in the garden for a long time, just staring at the tree. Then he dropped something and walked into the woods. "What did he drop?" someone asked. The boy held out a rusted chain. Key still attached. Alya took it. Her fingers went numb. It was the key to her father's study. She returned home. The door creaked as she entered the room that had remained locked for over a year. Dust covered every surface. Cobwebs hung like silk veils from the corners. She placed the key on the desk and sat down, letting her eyes adjust to the dim light. Everything was as it had been. Books on political law, journals stacked unevenly, and a small box with a broken lock. She pried it open. Inside were dozens of photographs. Of her mother, of the house, of Rucka, of Demas, smiling in some, scowling in others. In one, Demas stood beside a tree. Young, confident, unaware of the darkness that would come. Alya flipped through them, tears running silently down her cheeks. On the back of the final photo, in faint ink, was a sentence. "I didn't know how to stop. And then it was too late." She set the photo down, and she wept, not because she missed him, not because she forgave him, but because she realized something deeper, that evil wasn't always a monster in the shadows. Sometimes it was a father with too many regrets and not enough courage to face them. Later that week, the rain turned to storms. Power lines fell. Roads flooded. The garden became a swamp. But the tree held firm. And beneath it, villagers began to place candles. One by one. No one spoke. They simply knelt, lit a candle and walked away. Not for Mr. Arman. Not for Demas. But for truth. For the price it demanded. For the pain it left behind. Alya sat on her porch, wrapped in a blanket. Her mother brought her tea and sat beside her. "Do you think he's dead?" Rena asked. Alya didn't answer. She stared into the storm. And whispered, "I think part of him died long ago. The rest, she thought, was still dying, slowly, painfully, with each echo of the bell, each candle lit in silence." In a week, the district police would issue a national arrest warrant. In 2 months, a documentary filmmaker would come to Sempaka. In 3 months, university students would begin interviewing the villagers. But tonight there was only rain. And a garden that refused to drown. And a daughter who refused to forget. It was the quietest morning Sempaka had seen in years. Not a single rooster crowed. No motorbikes passed on the gravel road. The sound of the rain, which had fallen relentlessly for weeks, was finally gone. In its place hung a strange stillness, like the world was holding its breath. Alya woke before dawn. She sat up in bed and knew something was going to happen today. Rocca lay by the doorway, his fur damp, his breathing slow. He had grown older in the past year. The once strong and watchful guardian now carried the heaviness of time in every movement. His eyes still held clarity, but his limbs trembled when he stood. That morning he didn't follow Alya outside. He just watched. She stepped into the garden. The tree stood firm as ever, its bark darkened by months of rain. But today it looked different. As if it had grown even taller overnight. As if it were trying to reach something unseen. Beneath it, the earth was soft and fragrant, alive. Alya knelt and began to dig. Not with a shovel. With her bare hands. She didn't know why. She only knew that something waited beneath. Her fingers tore through the soil. Her nails cracked. The morning dew soaked into her clothes. And then her hand struck something. It splintered. She brushed away more soil and revealed a small wooden box, no larger than a brick. It was locked, but beside it, buried deeper, was another key. She turned it slowly. The lid creaked open. Inside, wrapped in yellowed cloth, were 4 items: a locket, a child's drawing, a folded letter, and a blood-stained ribbon. She took the letter first. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the words were clear. To whoever finds this, I ask only that you read until the end. My name is Demas, and this is not a confession. This is a warning. Alia sat back, her chest tightening. She read every line. Your father was not always the man you knew. Before greed took him, he was my friend, my brother-in-law. He loved your mother. He adored you. But he made a deal with a man from the city, a politician who promised land permits and titles if he helped remove certain people. I was one of them. He asked me to leave, quietly, to protect you. But I refused. So he had me followed, beaten, left to die. I survived. For 3 days I crawled through the jungle, half blind, half conscious. And then I reached this tree. Gave me shelter. Gave me time. Time to write this. Time to remember who I was. I died here. But my story didn't. If you're reading this, that means someone finally listened. Tell the world. She folded the letter, her hands trembling. The drawing was next. Child scrawl. Man, a girl, a dog. The names were written in crooked letters. Uncle Demas. Ulya. Luka. Tears streamed down her face. The locket contained a photo of her as a baby. Demas was holding her, smiling. She didn't remember that day, but she felt it now, as if memory had returned through the blood in her veins. The ribbon was last, red, ripped at one end. She had seen it before, in an old family photo. Her father had worn it on his wrist during university. She clutched it tightly and stood. Later that day, the village was buzzing. Mr. Arman had been spotted again. Not in the flesh, but in a CCTV recording. A gas station near the mountains, 10 hours from Sempaka. The image was grainy, but unmistakable. Same build, same limp, same stare. He had paid in cash, bought water, bread, and matches, then vanished. The district police called Alia. They were sending a team. She thanked them, but she already knew. He wasn't coming back. Not because he was dead, but because he had no home to return to. By late afternoon, the sky darkened again. Thunder rolled in the distance. Rocco whined, lifting his head. Alia came to his side and knelt beside him. You remember the garden, don't you? She whispered. He licked her hand. The old dog's eyes fluttered. He rested his head back down. Then stillness. Real stillness. No breath. No tremble. No sound. She pressed her forehead to his. Thank you, she said softly. For keeping me alive. For staying. She buried him beneath the tree, next to where Demas had once been. And as she placed the final stone, she looked up. A single white flower had bloomed, right at the base of the trunk. 1 week later, journalists arrived. They wanted to document the truth. She gave them the letters, photos, key. The garden became a symbol of memory, of justice, of everything that had once been buried. University students arrived in waves. Some planted more flowers. Some sat beneath the tree and wrote poetry. Some simply stared and wept. They called it the Tree of Secrets. 3 months later, Alia was invited to speak at a national forum. On corruption, on grief, on truth. She walked onto the stage with calm in her heart. She no longer trembled when saying her father's name. She no longer cried when mentioning Demas. She told the story, not to condemn, but to illuminate. And when she spoke of Rocca, the hall fell silent. There was something about loyalty, she said, that had no language. Only silence. Only presence. Only love. Back in Sempica, things began to change. The villagers built a small shelter near the tree, with a bench and a plaque. It read, "To those who protected what was right, even when the world looked away." And Alia, on nights when the wind was soft, sat by the tree. Sometimes she talked to it. Sometimes she just listened. And sometimes she swore she could still hear footsteps. Familiar. Low. Like Rocca's paws padding through wet soil. And when she closed her eyes, she could almost feel him, curled beside her, guarding her dreams. One last time. In this life, truth often walks a long and painful road, through silence, secrets, and sorrow, before it finally finds the light. This story teaches us that sometimes the people we trust the most can cause the deepest wounds, while those we overlook, like a loyal dog, may become the truest guardians of justice and love. Rocca's loyalty was a symbol of unconditional love. He could not speak. He could not reveal what he knew. But through his actions, he led Alia to a truth long buried. In his silence, he was a witness to injustice, to love betrayed, and to kindness that never faded. This story also shows how powerful a single decision can be. When a person chooses the path of greed or power, it can destroy lives and relationships. But on the other hand, the courage to face the past, even when it hurts, is the first step toward healing. The greatest wisdom we gain from this story is that the truth may be delayed, hidden, or forgotten for a time, but it never dies. It only waits for the right moment and for a heart brave enough to uncover it. And when that moment comes, the truth not only sets us free, it heals us. We can all be like Alia in our lives. Or perhaps like Rocca, the one who watches in silence, protects without praise, and loves without limits. And from this story, may we learn never to turn a blind eye to wrongdoing, never to compromise justice, and never to stop seeking the light, even when the world seems dark. Please remember that this story is entirely fictional. It is a work of imagination crafted to feel real, not based on actual events or people. Its purpose is to inspire reflection, awaken emotion, and remind us of the power of truth, loyalty, and courage in our lives. Thank you, dear listeners, for staying with us until the end of this story. If you felt something stir inside you while listening, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know where you're listening from and what this story meant to you. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to create more meaningful and touching stories. Your support is the heart of what keeps us going. See you again in the next story.